All right, so I'd like to introduce Chris Danley with Vitruvian Planning to everybody. Um, Chris has been working at this for a long time. I wish we had 100 Chris's, but we only have one, so he gets spread pretty thin on the work that he does, including the Looking Glass Academy, which is a great way to learn about walkability in your community. So Chris, do you want to go ahead and share your screen and get started on the presentation? And thanks for being here.
Yeah, my pleasure. And thank you everybody for joining the call today, and appreciate the opportunity to speak with everybody. Before I go into the presentation, since I don't know too many folks aside from mostly on your team itself, briefly I'll just introduce myself. So I have been in the world of planning for, I can't even believe I'm going to say it, but I'm approaching a couple of decades almost before long. I've been in Idaho for 16 years now, and have worked for myself for the better part of about 11 years. I started in the public sector, so I kind of know that world, and then went into the private sector at the exact wrong time when the economy tanked in 2008, which was just a lot of fun. But ultimately, I have been had the good privilege of working all over the state. And I think we're somewhere in the 70 to 80% of the cities in this state we've had some contact with and worked with, including both of yours at one point, more so in Orofino, a little less than in Haley, but certainly know Haley very well. And so, yeah, I come from that world of transportation, but a lot of health integration. That's really my passion, is how to use public health to inform transportation and then vice versa. And as Cynthia mentioned, I've also had the good fortune of doing a course on walkability for, I think it's been about 6 years. Was just in Buell this week, going to be in Marsing next week, Hagerman the week before that, and some other work that has allowed me to go kind of all over the country to see the smallest of small to the biggest of big. And everybody has their problems. I think one of the smallest towns, as an example, of Hollister, Idaho, population 150, it's illegal to walk to school. It is by policy illegal to walk to school. And I've actually had someone tell me that they've in fact been given a citation for doing so. And those are the kind of things that I hear all the time that just blow my mind. And we're constantly trying to work as hard as we can to help communities like Orofino and Haley overcome some of these obstacles as much as we can. So that's just a little bit about me. I want to jump into this, and hopefully this all works like it's supposed to. Just 1 minute. There we go. All right. Can I get a verbal that's all coming through?
Looks good.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so I'm only going to hit a few slides. I want to make sure to give everybody any questions that we may have, better dialogue, but I just want to sort of set the stage. And I like to think of this whole concept of how to make things happen in this sort of 4P sort of process a little bit. And it shouldn't be as hard as I think we make it, frankly. I think we kind of complicate the heck out of this stuff once in a while. And that's not to suggest there aren't some portions of the idea of walkability or bikeability that are complicated, but a lot of it's very doable. And in fact, I want to end this with a video that I took in Buell just the other day that I think will really reiterate that point. So just to sort of start, I think the most important thing we can really begin this conversation with is to recognize, first and foremost, that walkability touches pretty much everything about our communities, and our people. And so often I think is the case when we think of walkability, folks instantly say, well, there's sidewalks or there's not sidewalks, and that's it. Well, there's so much more to it than that. And the folks who are on this call, from the economic development to the engineering to safe routes to school and everything in between, are sort of a testament to that, right? You're involved in walkability in one way or the other. So it's a good thing and a foundation on which we can build. So I'm going to start with this first P, and I'm going to basically just start with promotion. And essentially, promotion is just putting a line in the sand and proclaiming, this is what we're going to be. This is what we're deciding. This is what we have come to a conclusion of as a city, as a populace, that we want to do this and do it, follow through with it, right? And it's even saying it out loud and backing it up in certain ways. And so you can go up, for example, to Sandpoint, and you see the image in the upper right. That's the first thing you see when you come into Sandpoint on either end of US 95. They put those in. Well, you know what's happened since then? About 3 or 4 of the neighbors of Sandpoint have adopted that same proclamation, including Coeur d'Alene. So when you come into Coeur d'Alene now, you see the same thing. And they're just saying flat out, this is what you're going to do when you're in our town, right? Having events. Events is a way of promoting and proclaiming that this is what you want to be. The Safe Routes to School folks know this, but in about a month and a half from now or so is going to be International Walk to School Day. Perfect timing right now to get ahead of that. Go make it happen. Just do it, right? Get people to participate and start this effort if that's where we are. Asking your people what they see. I of course love doing that. And again, it doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be some elaborate survey or anything like that. If you want to go that route, great. But if you want to just, begin, and we're small enough in both instances, just having dialogue at the neighborhood coffee shop, right? Or people on the streets. If you utilize social media, go that route and ask people there. The lower left image on that slide is an art contest, and kids are the most honest people you're going to find. They will tell you what's going on, right? So there's a way to get ultimately sort of your message out and to understand what's happening. And then last thing, it's an older saying, but it's true, and that's be the change. And everybody that's on this call, what are we doing individually, right, to promote this concept? How are we leading by example? And I don't think we can forget that. So that's all sort of things within this realm of promotion that I think are important to start with. The next P I'm going to hit on, and we hit on this obviously quite a bit, but that's planning. And it sounds fundamental, but I'm often amazed at how many cities have no plan. And it sort of is an ad hoc approach to things. A plan doesn't necessarily have to be, again, an incredibly elaborate thing. That's not to suggest that a good investment in a plan won't pay off. But if the investment in the dollars aren't necessarily there, you may have perfectly fine in-house talent or neighbor, resident talent to put together some semblance of a plan. So ultimately it starts off with getting organized and even just going out with this second bullet. What do you have? What do you have? What is the condition of the things that you have, or what's missing, right? And start to piece together a map. I mean, if you had to, you can go all the way down into free Google Earth and put yourself something together, right? It doesn't have to be overly complicated. But from that point, and once you know what it is you do in fact have and what's missing, what are the priorities? Who do you ask? How do you go about determining that, right? And so if we have schools, it could be that. If it's our downtown Main Street, hey, maybe that's the route we go. But ultimately, we need to figure out, where are we going to start putting our money? The other concept here I want to make sure we get is fix and prevent. A lot of our planning ends up, I find a lot of our planning is about fixing, and it doesn't necessarily mean that that's actually a plan. That's more or less just, here's what we need to get right that's messed up right now, but how do we prevent other things, which is going to lead to the next P coming up. But it's part of why we need a plan in the first place, is to demonstrate the needs that we have and the desires that we are trying to pursue. The last few things here is who can help, right? I think so often is the case that folks assume that the municipal government is the only entity that can help. And while, yeah, it's true that municipal government does have a large role, they're not the only ones. There are other entities out there and funding sources, that can help to solve some of these, or at least somewhat, right? Or maybe they fund a portion of your whole program that allows you to move money into a different direction, and so on. But those are just strategies, that you can think about. And then lastly, if if you're to the point where you have a citywide plan, maybe you take it to the next level, or the opposite. If you don't want to do a citywide plan, maybe you focus on ADA. You think about curb ramps. You think about, sort of the more egregious violations that we think we have that we want to address first. There's money out there for ADA. So that might be a strategy. Or if you have a specific corridor in mind, maybe you simply focus with a plan on that corridor or a sub area as well. So there's lots of ways to do this. It doesn't have to be just one size fits all, but the biggest key and takeaway is you really need to have something. We need to get something on paper. So after we've promoted it and said, we're going to do this, and this is what we want to do, then it's getting that organization together and figuring out what that looks like. The next P I want to hit on is policy. And policy isn't the one that people get really excited about, but it really, really matters, right? So once you have that plan, for example, well, how do your policies align with that? So often is the case, our zoning code matters, right? And if our zoning code doesn't back up our plan, then we are absolutely missing out on that prevention piece in particular, right? So if we are getting new development, growth, what have you, and they're slipping through the cracks because they're not contributing to your sidewalk network or whatever else you're asking them to, then we're missing out on that. And ultimately that's going to come around and be a need later on down the road, right? How does your comprehensive plan back up those ideals in the plan and what we're codifying in our zoning code? We know that, yes, in fact, our comp plan is not necessarily something that legally in LUPA is as lawful, for example, as the zoning code, but there is absolutely a place for it. And there's definitely a backup to your zoning code, should you need to demonstrate that. But I also think it's another way to declare this is what we're going to be and why. Okay. Other things, street design standard. This is one that a lot of Idaho cities miss because most Idaho cities adopt the same statewide street design standards as other communities. Not too many have their own, and that's really unfortunate. You can certainly come up with your own. Obviously, you have to, make sure all of them fit best practices. You can't just redesign a highway, of course, but, there are things in best practice documents that are out there all over the place that can provide that document or that understanding. So in some cases, I'm always amazed that we default to sometimes the largest, most expensive cross sections that are very expensive to maintain, when in fact, we have the ability to come in and tweak those as we see fit. Code enforcement and maintenance, they kind of go hand in glove. I'm a firm believer that, for example, the picture in the lower left, if our streets and our sidewalks rather are in that shape, then I'm kind of the mindset personally, this is just my take, but are we really in a position to go add more sidewalks when we're not taking care of necessarily the ones that we have? I fully understand that that's easier said than done, especially in small town environments when sort of everybody knows everybody. The politics are different than in larger communities. I certainly understand that. But there are smaller cities. Emmett, for example, is one that comes to mind. Another one is Chubbuck has done some small scale, like limited improvement districts types of things, local improvement districts, and other communities have done those types of things to get funding if that's what's needed to help enforce the very code and programs and so forth that help back up the code. But our code is a tool, and guess what? In some cases, it's already there and it's free. So it's really about going out and making sure that we follow it, because it is our declared law of our city, right? And then the other piece I want to put, adversary may be a tough word, but I'm going to use it anyway. And so understanding in this case, the state, I totally understand, knowing both communities, that your highway system has incredible impact in your main streets, right? I get that. So where am I coming from? Well, that link, the first one right there, is the context sensitive solution guide, which is pictured in the upper right. That's an ITD document that is their own. It's in-house that they generated, and therefore it's, yeah, here, look at this ITD, this is your own words. And then the other one is a very recent AASHTO guideline or document rather, which is best practice. And you see for yourself the guide for planning, design, and operation and of pedestrian facility, a real catchy title there. Well, one of the authors was, in fact, an ITD engineer. And so they had input. And so therefore I look at that and think, well, it's basically been blessed then. And this is their own, again, documentation that says this is the best practice. So, okay, then let's use it. And in my opinion, demonstrate how, in fact, it can be helpful for communities like Haley and Orofino. The last P is the one I think most people probably think of, and of course, that's projects. Projects range, of course, like anything. And projects, most of the time when we think of walking, we probably, again, gravitate towards sidewalks, but that's definitely not the only thing. So I'm of the mindset, do something immediately. You can go out tomorrow and do a tactical urbanism project, just like pictured in the upper left. That's just spray chalk and some reflective pylons, right? And instantly, in this case, we made some curb extensions, but we've done, high visibility crosswalks, we've done refuge islands, we've done all kinds of stuff. So I personally love this approach. I think it's effective. It gives you an opportunity to generate some excitement. You can always tweak the things as you need it because it's temporary, right? But it gets that ball rolling. And then it gets you to be able to do that second one, which is try and try again. So if something works, great, maybe try it somewhere else and just keep that going. Keep as part of that proclamation and promotion piece. Here's how projects can kind of get put into it, and ultimately it backs up the other things, which in that case could be the planning or even the policy part of it. As I've mentioned, not just sidewalks. The upper right, for example, is a really amazing sort of a side path that's up in Lewiston, and so that's, pardon me, a good multi-use facility, but that takes time, right? And so multiple use pathways are a really good facility. They can be done in an urban context as well as more suburban or rural. Side paths and connected paths and riverside paths are all part of this discussion, but again, sort of need to be codified as much as possible. This really all is about building your case, whether it's the demonstration project, the plan, et cetera. And I think for my money, again, it's sort of leading to maybe those bigger picture and bigger ticket items rather, that are going to cost more money later on. These are the ways to get some of these small things done that can lead to the bigger and better that we really are aspiring to. Last few things here. So don't forget the details. This picture in the lower left, I love, love coming into Idaho cities because oftentimes we walk away seeing something I haven't seen before. In that case, guess what they did? They went in, they put this rumble strip with an asphalt shoulder, and then they striped it. Why they selected green, I don't really recall. In fact, that was a school zone, but it's an effective treatment, and there's lots of those types of things all over the state. So the details matter, and including in the lower right, for example, the timing of our signals. And I know this is more applicable. I don't remember if there's a signal in Orofino. I don't think that there is, but I know there's certainly some in Haley, of course. But even going out and looking at the timing of our signals, and that includes flashers, by the way, our flashers also need to be timed appropriately. But that's a detail, right? We get caught up in the physical hardware or the physical concrete and asphalt and all that kind of stuff. But sometimes it can be things like lighting, or in this case, the crossing timing, and other features that really help out our walking environment. And then ultimately too, the idea of before and after data is really important, and data can come in different forms. Clearly, having our tube counters out there and understanding the traffic volumes, speeds, and that sort of thing before and after is one thing. But even I'm a big believer in qualitative information as well. observational information, cameras and pictures and stories even, I think is all stuff that's good to bring before decision makers and say, here was the result, here's how it went, and ultimately we know whether it did or didn't work, right? And so forth. You get the general idea. So I'm gonna just finish this with some takeaways I hope that maybe you got from this. But I'm going to start with work with what you can control. What does that mean? It means that I understand completely, probably even in many cases more so, the frustration that exists within our communities when it comes to our highways. I fully understand, and in some cases, there are some districts that may be easier to work with than others. I know both of your districts, and I can only imagine, some of the frustrations that you may have. But what you do control are your local streets. So until you can gain momentum, maybe that's where you really begin a lot of this discussion, is building up what you can control, what you do have input on, and building your momentum and the general public sentiment, like bullet number 2, right? Getting the people behind what you're trying to do is so important. Over time, I think that some of those defensive arguments start to break down, and sometimes they go away altogether. Not always, and I know it's a tough fight, but I think it's worth it. And certainly the one thing that you can do is again, can control the actions on your own street. The fork versus the spear. What do I mean by that? So often I think we attempt to do these things using one general approach, and a lot of times that's, we need all these projects, right? We know we need this, we need that, and we just go and focus on sort of one thing. Well, in this case, I think this is a little more delicate, and so that's why I'm kind of going with the fork analogy, right? Which has, in this case, 4 different prongs, right? So there's a whole bigger comprehensive picture and strategy that can be employed to help this discussion move forward, rather than focus on either what we don't have or just the money or 1 or 2 major projects. There's other ways I think we can get there. And then I'm a firm believer in this 4th bullet. And what I mean by this generation's responsibility, I'm a huge believer that our previous generations often did really wonderful things in the world of walkability, not always, but most of the time, and gave us a gift. And that gift is this system that we might have in place now. I'm a firm believer that it's incumbent upon us to take what was given to us, make it even better, and bring that forward to the next generation. And that's definitely a rallying cry, right? And hopefully a reason that people can get behind what you're trying to do. So with all of that, the 4 Ps, the reasons why we're doing it, and some of the takeaways, I'm hoping that Mick here can inspire you a little bit, maybe more so than me, and let's go, right? Let's roll up our sleeves and get going. And I do want to do one thing. I hope, can you see that video?
I don't see it. I still see the PowerPoint, Chris.
Okay, that is because, hold on a minute, let me try this again. Let me do this. I'm working with 3 screens, that's why. Okay, that should come up. Now you should see that, yeah?
Yep, there it is. No audio. Oh.
The audio is not coming through.
No, and that has been a problem with videos in the past. Has anybody?
I'll narrate it, don't worry. It's
okay.
Just me talking like a monkey and getting people to understand what we're doing. That was the mayor, the city clerk, and 1 council member from the city of Buell. And we went out to this intersection that is a local street. It's called Main Street, but it's not their actual highway Main Street, which is down the block. And what we had on this intersection, 4-legged intersection with angled parking, front and angled parking, and that presented a great opportunity to go out and instantly create curb extensions all over the place that slow the turning traffic and give pedestrians a head start and better sight lines to be seen by the drivers that are coming back and forth. And it probably took us about 30 minutes, maybe 45 minutes. The city was just incredibly helpful, and it was kind of honestly done sort of on a whim. We had gone out the day before and talked about it conceptually, but the mayor said the next morning, yeah, let's go do it. The video failed, so you get the idea. But we went out there, and man, the mayor was, her mouth was open in complete shock for probably half the time that they were standing out there, because she was just watching from a distance. They weren't, too close, which sometimes can skew the behavior of drivers. But she's sitting there just watching people totally slow down. We weren't in the middle of the street or anything either when it was all done. And she's just, going, how is this working? And I love it because it's the closest to being a wizard that I'll ever be. And it's a lot of fun. And I also then opened her eyes that I had another tool in my tool chest, which I have these little foldable boxes. And so you instantly open them up, have a center. So it's kind of a box. And I said, do you have any fake flowers? Let's put some fake flowers in here, throw those out. And she's just going, this is, so cool. And then I said, do you have any friends with hay bales? And she's, absolutely, it's Buell, right? And so they were going to get some hay bales and put some of them at the key locations to just further accentuate the crossings and ultimately, I think, give a little more vertical presence and so forth to drivers. And so, yeah, it didn't take long, and we didn't ask for permission. The mayor was there. I guess she gave us permission, but again, just go out and do something and get people talking. And we heard people talking too, because we were at the post office. So the post office is, as everybody knows, in small town Idaho, right? Post office is where everything happens, all the conversations and so on. And people who were not a part of our project were watching, and they generally were shaking their head up and down. And so it's still out there to this right now. And it's, I don't know when they're going to take the cones back. I don't think for a while. She was pretty convinced that it's probably going to stay for a while. But anyway, that's enough out of me. I think you get the gist, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Chris. That's a great story about what you guys did in Buell. I saw that video on Facebook, and I just thought that was great. And I loved how you introduced your team there, because they were all there ready to go to work and watch that happen. So that's pretty exciting. I wonder if we can get the link of that video with the audio. Is it on Facebook? I can send it.
Yeah, you know what? I can
You want to send the link?
I'll send you the
chat?
Yeah, I'll have the link. It's to my page, but that doesn't matter. So here is in the chat, and here's this and this and this. There you go.
Great, thank you. Also, I put in the chat the link to the ITD context sensitive solution guide for people. So we had Don last week talking about some of the different transportation manuals. I would definitely put that one in your arsenal also, and I will make sure to put that out on our website so that you can access that. That's a really valuable one.
Let me just real quick, if I can, I'll take 30 seconds. Because with Elaine on the call, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention another situation that happened that's so illustrative of this. An even smaller town than Buell. We were up in Mackey. This was about, I don't know what it was, a lot of years ago. fewer grays in the goatee back then. Anyway, we had a great
I think I had brown hair then.
Right. We had a great conversation. The school in Mackey is at one end of the town, and a lot of drivers going way too fast. The mayor would ride around in his golf cart, and it was kind of a crazy situation. And we said, the part of the problem is the street has nothing, no markings whatsoever. So let's just stripe this thing and create, I think we recommended a 10-foot lane in the shoulder as a start. Well, here's the cool thing about Idaho. It's one of my favorite stories. Well, one of our attendants was the public works director. We get to talking to him and he starts to say, well, I'm also the volunteer fire department chief. Wow, okay, 2 hats. And he goes, but I'm also the varsity baseball coach. Like, okay. So this man took it upon himself. I think it was maybe 2 or 3 weeks after we left. And he took his baseball chalk marking machine and he went out and his team spray painted the road using that. And it wasn't exactly how I would have done it, but you know what? It was effective. He sent pictures back. And then we get the comment from the mayor is that I'll be damned if that didn't work. And so, you know, it didn't take much and it just got the ball rolling. In this case, a guy that wanted to just see some differences and took what limited resources he had and went and did it, you know, good for them. I think the important part to mention is there's no MUTCD police roaming the streets out there who are going to call the federal authorities if you put a little spray chalk down on a local street, you know. So I think we kind of get paralyzed by things and decisions at times when I think we have a lot more ability than we think. So anyway, there you go.
So to add to that story, 2 weeks after he did that, was walk to school day, and they had there was a park that was on that route, and so they had all the school buses drop all the kids off at the park that day instead of at school. They fed them breakfast in the park, and then they all walked to school on the new walkway. It was pretty fun.
That's right. Sorry, it was like 3 minutes, not 90 seconds.
That's okay.
And I have some pictures somewhere. I can't find them right at the moment, but when I do, I'll send them to everybody.
I want to open this up right now to the group to see if anybody has any questions for Chris. And I also, while you're thinking about questions for Chris, I also want to ask the group if anybody has, in this group, has anybody done what Chris and Elaine are talking about? Has anybody gone out and tried something in your neighborhood or on a street where you could see we call them, you know, lighter, quicker, cheaper, or tactical urbanism, or whatever you want to call it, where people have gone out and they've spray chalked or they've put out a hay bale or a couple of hay bales or cones? Has anybody tried to do any of that?
Yep. As your street department employee here, please don't go put out random hay bales. I will have to go get those.
All right, thanks, King.
Haley did it. Haley did the advisory lane, and it was a demonstration project that started and then ultimately, I think, as far as I'm aware, became a permanent one. But it started with some signage and some, you know, basic markings. And I mean, it was maybe a little more formal, you know, a lot more formal in some ways, but, you know, yeah, it was a great way to do it. And something that has not been tried very often. That's something that they should deserve credit for. An advisory lane at that time was a pretty new concept, at least in respects to sort of the blessings of the federal government, right? But in practice, it's been done all the time. But credit to them.
Last year, we also put in a roundabout made out of rubber speed bumps, just to try slowing traffic down on one of our roads.
How'd it go?
They went just as fast over the speed bumps.
Okay.
And the problem, or the other thing we've seen, is that they slowed down coming into the speed bumps and then accelerated away, so back up to the speed. So we had that same, I wouldn't say it was successful, but it was a great attempt at trying to slow traffic down.
But I guess I would push back in a sense of success is determined by how you define it. And if you walk away learning things, right, even if it doesn't necessarily come off as what you hoped, but if you learned from the experiment and say, well, hey, you know, the approach angle of the roundabout maybe wasn't enough, or the exit angle wasn't enough, maybe the circle needs to be bigger, whatever the technical part of it is, but you learn. And I think even if that's the end result, then I think, to me, that's a great thing.
Yeah, it was definitely a great attempt. it's kind of it's a rough area there. The road's a little wide, so
Yeah.
and it's through a what we call an artificial speed zone because it's a school zone. So we have a 20 mile to 15 back up to 20, and it's
Mhm.
kind of away from the school still, but it's within the school zone. So, it's trying to regulate that traffic. It's kind of is what it is.
Yeah. I know Rufino has a similar issue with respect to the highway heading out of town, right? Going towards the north with up by the high school and stuff. And that's hot. Yeah, that shouldn't be as complicated as we've made it, but I understand that that's not your road. And it's about the easiest darn thing I've seen in this state, but good heavens, it just has been made so much more complicated than it needs to be because of the bureaucracy of things. Frankly, I'm just being honest. And I know that you all wish you could change some of those things as like yesterday. I know, having worked with Chris and your former mayor, who's, now the manager, that the frustration out that way in particular. And then as you come into town is rough.
Hey, Chris, Guido has sent you a question, and
okay.
so he wanted you to take a look at that and answer his question. Thanks.
I can speak because if do you have any ideas on how to create roundabouts without a $500,000 design cost and a $500,000 construction cost, something like candles in a circle that could be placed in an afternoon? Oh, yeah, absolutely. And so in terms of the design cost, I mean, with regard, and I know that your numbers are sort of flippant, but there's probably some truth to that in some instances as well, depending on the complexity of things. There's a great guide out there. It's a tactical urban. Let me back up if I could say it right. Tactical urbanism design guide. It's sort of like the tools of what you can use, how to use them, the tools that will last a matter of a couple of weeks up to, more like 6 months or what have you. So there's a sort of a temporal element to the material list. That's a great guide that I highly recommend. And I would start with that. In fact, that's really a recommendation to both cities, is that I'm a firm believer that having a good library of good documents in-house is fabulous. You're being a municipal government, oftentimes you can get things for free or virtually no cost that I can't. Like that AASHTO guideline that I just sent that was from 2021. It kills me that thing's paid for with federal money, but yet they charge $170 or whatever it is, to get a copy of it. I don't understand that, but certain entities can, have better leeway than others. But that would be something I would highly recommend.
I'm going to try sharing my screen because I found a traffic circle. Let's see if I can get this. This is actually, can you guys see my screen?
Yep. There you go. Wow.
This is from South Bend. So this was when Pete Buttigieg, I think, was still mayor, but this is something that I found, and you can see that they're using like that rubber striping stuff.
Yeah.
And then some candlesticks, and then I think just some potted trees. That's a big, big intersection right there. And then they painted. And so it's kind of a fun way to slow cars down. And then they have that nice circle, or excuse me, the nice sign to explain to people. And then they've got the sign so people know to go around the circle. So, but it's inexpensive material that's being used. I really like this picture. I just wanted to share that with the group.
And that's a very elaborate version, with all of the different things going on. It's in a situation with like a roundabout. That's one where I wouldn't just go out and do it, obviously. And I'm not trying to be, again, sort of just cavalier about the concept of just going out and throwing stuff in the streets. But what I do think is if that, you all are small enough communities where you get 4 or 5 people together in a conversation and things are going to happen. Good things are going to happen. And so that's the kind of thing what I'm getting at. Like with that example, that's definitely one where you're going to want to let the neighborhood know, right? You're going to want to make sure everybody's understanding, because you also don't want to set it up for failure. And if you throw something too wild out there right off the bat, then, you know, obviously sometimes people get really worked up about things, and you don't want it to fail before it's even begun.
Like, I guess as far as projects go, I'd want to do something that's feasible, and due to snow removal, curb extensions are kind of a challenge here in Haley. Do you have any thoughts on that or other suggestions?
I have a lot of thoughts on that one.
Crossings.
We get it blows me away at how often I hear about snow removal and curb extensions. And that is not me discounting the fact that indeed both communities, particularly Haley, you do get a lot of snow. Don't get me wrong. You know what city has some of the most curb extensions in America? Anchorage, Alaska. And they're all over in their downtown, right? I was just in Grand Forks, North Dakota, where it gets 30 below. And I think if I recall correctly, they get somewhere in the neighborhood of about 70 inches of snow a year. Guess what they've got in downtown? They've got plenty of curb extensions. And the key is not the curb extension itself. The key is the taper as you go into the curb extension from the curb line, making sure it's not too abrupt. And if you have a bullnose type of a design, then your plow driver is going to be mad at you. And I understand that, and they should be mad at you. So we can help them out. We can create a better design. It can have a much, easier angle to come out of than in sunny areas where they don't have to worry about that as much. The other thing you can do is you can put some vertical features in, even if it's just temporary reflective posts or what have you during those winter months to help the driver out, right? So if we can put some things in there, even just reflective sticks that they can see clearly, and then, bang, there you go. You can, get through there and be seen without any problem.
What did you mean by the bullnose? So you talked about the taper, which to me would mean, I guess, from a top view, tapering into the street or tapering out to the extension. But the bullnose is more of like a cross section, I think, that you were talking about.
What I mean is that sometimes in older designs, the curb extension has a much more blunt front end as you're coming in from the on-street parking, whereas instead, if it can start a little farther back and have a much less angle coming into it, that's what I'm shooting for. That bullnose, when I have a plow, right, if I'm coming in and I can't see it and this thing is jutting out into my travel way, that's a problem. If it's an angle and if I have vertical things, then I can, get around it.
If you look at the curves in Haley, you'll see what happens when they're vertical face on a flat front, and the grader hits them.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I think it's Haley that's had the steel ribbon that is on the top. No, I can't remember if it's either Haley or Sandpoint, but has done
Sandpoint. And I've been kind of talking to them about it. I need to reach back out again.
They just put a real simple steel ribbon across the top of the curb, and it's one more tool to help the snowplow glance against that versus really take it out big chunks.
Hey, Chris, both of these communities are thinking about doing a demonstration project for their project next year. They don't know. I don't know that anybody's really landed on that yet, but I think they're both talking about that. And, I think about that what I've tried to do and the pushback I've gotten. I mean, can you just talk about that? I mean, like maybe some how-tos. Like, one thing I've learned is I have to keep going back. I have to assume that things are going to take time, but I don't want people to be fearful and to think, forget it, this is going to be way too hard, because I definitely think it's worth it to try stuff.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so just can you talk about maybe, you know, some expectations so that people are realistic about this and their approach?
Well, it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier, I think, is I don't think we need to swing for the fences right away. You know, it can be something that's much smaller that allows us to build some momentum. And if everybody's concerned it's on the we don't, you know, don't do it on the busiest road or okay, we want to get to that point, then all right, let's figure out another place for it, right? Or if the big concern is that we can't get trucks through, okay, then let's get the fire truck out and drive and adjust things, you know, and that sort of thing. So I think we just kind of sometimes get so stuck in that in the negative side of things, when at the end of the day, man, we're just trying to move the needle a little bit, you know, just a tiny bit, celebrate those little wins, you know, and ultimately those things will grow and grow and grow. So I'd have anybody who has you know, wants to talk more, they can certainly fire off my phone number. I'd be happy to chat with them. But I've seen a lot of communities who can do it right. Sandpoint didn't start with big projects, you know. Yeah, now they have this massively wonderful, beautiful pathway along the river and I-90 or US 95. That wasn't the first thing that they were doing, right? They were doing much smaller projects, even with like that billboard or school zone type crossings and things of that nature. And like public art is all over Sandpoint as a way to enhance the pedestrian experience, right? And so all of those types of things come with time and come with graduating to that next level after we can get some things built and momentum going.
Thanks so much. I don't know that anybody else has any questions, but in the meantime, I just want to share a couple things. Elaine put a link. Let's see, Deanna put something out, materials and design guide, street plans, collaborative. I don't know what that is, but Deanna put that in the chat. That looks like that's from Vermont. I bet that's really interesting. And then Elaine put out the tactical urbanism guide. So there's a link to that. That's great. And then I also put out the link on our website to the Walking Fellows Institute, where we're putting out all these documents, and we do have the rural street guide there so that people can go look at it. And as we pick up more of these guides, we will be putting them out on that page. And that's where we also put these recordings. So just
Great.
a reminder to everybody.
Well, thank you for the time. I appreciate it.
Yes,
Thanks.
thank you. I just want to say thank you. I didn't ask a lot of questions. I think, you know, Brenda and I are new enough to this that we're just kind of soaking things in, learning, but we really appreciate all the great information.
Yeah, my pleasure. Give me a holler. I know Orofino kind of like the back of my hand. Did several things there. So
what have you done in Orofino? Can I like anything related to what we might be interested in, or?
Very much so. We started off doing this kind of plan called an activity connection plan, which was a concept I can tell you more about if you've not seen that document. But basically it's all about taking advantage of what we know, and what we know is most people walk for recreation. So it's okay, let's start with our recreational sites, enhance those, and address our projects near those. And then the other one was we came up and did our walkability training in Orofino a couple years ago.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay.
Good to know. We have seen that document. We were wondering.
Dust it off.
I know there's a lot of good information.
Yeah, you kind of have a plan ready to go, because I mean, Orofino is not so large that and you have a lot of parks, like a lot of those little facilities all over the place. I was surprised for the per capita rate anyway. There's a lot of little things in Orofino all over the place. So
Yes. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So I'll put these links out on the website so that if anybody wants to take a look at them, they'll be out on that webpage.
All right.
For
And
future reference.
I will send the images from Mackie showing the public works director, baseball coach, EMT, fire chief painting the road with his baseball striping machine. And then the kids walking on it.
There you go.
It was great.
All right. Well, I got to get going, but I appreciate the time. And again, I'm always open to you.
Thanks, Chris. We appreciate
All
your
right.
time today. Appreciate
My
all your
pleasure.
knowledge. Take
Take
care.
care.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye, everybody. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.